Thank you very much for coming today. My name is Linda Abraham. I want to first of all thank GMAT Club for hosting this event, Applying in 2021, Your Complete Application Roadmap. My name is Linda Abraham, and I'm the founder and CEO of Accepted. I'm presenting this for GMAT Club. I also want to thank you, the attendees here today, for coming, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of information out of this session. A little bit about me. My name is Linda Abraham. I'm the founder of Accepted, which I founded in 1994. I'm also the co-founder of the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants, and I served as its first president. I co-authored MBA Admissions for Smarties. I have been quoted in the Wall Street Journal, Poets and Quants, Business Because, U.S. News, and many other media on MBA admissions. And most importantly, I've been a member of the GMAT Club since April 2003. I also have a gift for participants in today's events. This is a roadmap that you can use, a timeline in preparing for round one deadlines. Obviously, you can move it 3 months later if you want to apply or 4 months later if you want to apply for round two deadlines. But it just lays out for you what you need to do and provides, again, a suggested time frame in which to do it. I'm going to go into more depth in this presentation. You can access it at accepted.com/MBA timeline, and you can get it after the presentation. Again, that's accepted.com/MBA timeline. We also have an Are You Ready to Apply quiz. Again, this is a free tool that you can use. You will also get advice on how to improve potential weaknesses in your profile. This is also free, and the URL, as you can see on your screen, is accepted.com/MBA quiz GC. Okay. Now, I want to congratulate all of you for being here in January, a good 9 months before you can possibly apply. I guess a few of you could apply early decision to Columbia and a few other programs, but for most of you, it's 9 months away from when you could apply. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of starting early and working steadily. You will get into more schools, you'll get into better schools, your chances of scholarship will improve, and you'll be more prepared to get the most out of your B-School experience when you arrive on campus because you're starting early, because you're going to approach the process thoughtfully and purposefully. And the fact that you're here today means you understand the importance of starting early, so I want to congratulate you, and now let's get started. That was the fun part, right? Now comes the work. So now is January. It's a month for you to assess and plan. And frankly, it's going to be a very busy time because this is when you can determine what you need to improve in your qualifications and your profile, and if you have the time to do it, or at least some of it. Some of you won't have to do everything I'm suggesting. In fact, most of you won't have to do everything I'm suggesting. If you have to do everything I'm suggesting, you may want to consider postponing to round two or even next year. All right. So what am I suggesting that you get started with? Well, the first thing would be the exam. You should be taking practice exams, and then deciding which test you're going to take. First of all, and there's a little bit of a chicken and egg question here, but you can take, most schools at this point are accepting the GRE or the GRE without any kind of preference. Increasing numbers of schools are accepting the EA. And of course, some schools are offering test waivers. We'll get to test waivers in a second. Assuming that the schools that you are applying to are going to require, at least one of them is going to require a test, the first thing you have to do is decide which test you're going to take. And what I would suggest you do is make sure the test you take is required by the schools you're most interested in at this point in time, and then determine which is the test you're going to do best on. And you can even put that part of it off until February. Secondly, what you need to do is clarify your post-MBA goals. You know how Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Effective People, says start with the end in mind. This is your end. This is your goal. This is your purpose for applying. And it should be front and center when you choose the programs you want to apply to. If you're not clear on your post-MBA direction, you need to clarify your desired post-MBA goal and the industry in which you want to work. Again, I'm talking about what you want to do after you get the MBA, not necessarily what you want to study, and the industry in which you want to work. You don't need to know which specific company or which suite number you want, that's for sure. But you can say that you'd like to work for a company like Deloitte or McKinsey or Google or whatever, okay? Or Goldman Sachs or whatever it might be. And then what do you actually want to do after your MBA? That's the role. If you're not clear or you lack direction, you need direction before you apply. And here are 2 suggestions for getting that clarity. 1, do online research about specific roles and functions, and then talk to people about their jobs. What do they like and what do they dislike? And we're going to be talking about that a little bit more in a second. The second thing you need to do is assess your academic record. Is your GPA, your undergraduate GPA, competitive for the schools you are applying to? Now, there is a difference. Most ranked MBA programs in the US GPA scale will want to see GPAs in the 3s, undergraduate GPAs in the 3s. The elite schools will want to see more like a 3.6, 3.7 is the average GPA. And obviously averages are averages because people are accepted with below average and above average numbers. Lower ranked schools are usually okay with 3.2s. But if you're not in that range, you have a problem. I know that many members of GMAT Club are from India. In terms of the Indian percentages, it's really, you want to be above 70% for the higher ranked programs, maybe even above 75% for the higher ranked programs. If you're below 70%, they're gonna question your undergraduate grades. If you don't feel that your undergraduate grades represent you well, or if they dipped a little bit, you may want to sign up for classes to beef up your GPA, or to demonstrate quant skills, or perhaps to improve your English and verbal skills. Work on whatever is weak. That's the name of the game. You can take classes after you take the test if you want, if it's too much to do simultaneously, or if you want to beef up the skills before you take the test so that you're that much ahead of the game. That makes sense too. But you do want to get the test out of the way. So I'm not sure which is the best way to go. Then one other thing about if you have a low GPA, there is a podcast that I did a few years ago on mitigating the impact of that GPA. It's called 5 A's for your low GPA, and it's at accepted.com/137. Again,
Hi Linda, this is Abhijit from GMAT Club. Uh, your microphone is off. We are not able to hear you.
oh, I'm sorry. I see what happened. Thank you. All right. Abhijit, do you know at what point they stopped hearing me?
It stopped approximately 20 seconds back.
Okay, so I'm going to, all right. I'm going to repeat myself a little bit, but the bottom line on leadership is if you don't have recent leadership experience, get it. And if you have it, try to expand it and enhance it. Okay, we're going to move on. Now, business is increasingly global, and obviously now we're in a pandemic, so it's more difficult to get global exposure. However, if you can get international or multicultural exposure, do it. Hopefully the lockdowns will end within the next several months. That will give you opportunities to expand your role. Now, you may have it if you've lived in more than one country, if you traveled frequently before Corona outside your home country, then you're okay. If you haven't done those things, either look for more globally facing work opportunities where you don't, I realize travel is almost impossible now. So look for opportunities for working on multicultural teams, multinational teams, or if you can, when it is safe to do so, try and squeeze in some personal international travel. over the summer, perhaps. Now, business schools do not want nerds and they don't want workaholics. They want multidimensional individuals whom they believe will contribute to their communities because they present a history of past contribution. Okay, so if you have evidence of having contributed to your community in the past, business schools have a basis on which to believe that you will contribute in the future. So if you've made time for hobbies and or community service in the past, great, just keep it up. If it's more or less lone hobbies, try and add to it a community or team element. If you haven't been involved in something like that, I'd strongly urge you to make time for something that you find enjoyable, meaningful, reflecting of your values, and hopefully contributes to your community. Now, realize community does not just mean the geographic neighborhood in which you live. We all belong to multiple communities. We belong to the community in which we live, perhaps a professional community, maybe a religious or ethnic community, maybe some affinity communities based on things that we enjoy doing or hobbies that we have. So what you need to do is make 1 or 2 serious commitments, not 10. In other words, don't commit to do something in every community that you belong to. Commit to do something in 1 or 2 communities, preferably an assumption of responsibility involving others, because then you can also show leadership and teamwork, initiative, organizational abilities, and some of the other things that business schools are interested in. All right, so that was just assessment of what you need to do in January. And you can make a list. You can say, check this off. I've done it. I'm okay. Or I need to improve, or I'm going to look for ways to improve. Okay, so that's January. In February, you get moving. Okay, so here's where you're going to really clarify your goals. You want to arrange for informational interviews. I would suggest at least 4 informational interviews in the month of February. Speak to colleagues and mentors and connect with people in positions you think you would be interested in based on the online research you did in January or simply your general knowledge of business and yourself. In your interviews, in your informational interviews, ask your interviewees what their days are like, what they like and dislike about their work, their employer, their work environment, as well as other questions that are important to you. If you can, network with people who are in hiring roles and ask them what they're looking for in new hires for the roles that you find most attractive. By the end of the month, you should aim to have professional direction that will be your North Star in choosing where to apply and ultimately in choosing where to focus on business schools. Okay? You might extend this into March, as you'll see in a minute, but again, the point is to start on this research if you aren't clear on what you want to do post-MBA. You can also start doing school research, and you can start with specialty rankings for your area of interest, assuming you know what it is. And then during your informational interviews with the people I mentioned just a minute ago, ask which programs they attended and where does their company hire from for the positions you are most interested in. If you're speaking with an MBA, and hopefully you will be, what classes and activities did they find valuable when they were doing their MBA? And now is the time to start with serious test prep. Okay, again, choose the test you're going to take based on which one was easiest for you in practice exams. And also think about what method of test prep you're going to use and can afford that will get you the highest score you can. This is particularly important if you want to go into investment banking or into the strategy consulting firms, because many of them will look at a test score and use it as a screening tool in interviewing on the way out of business school. So you want to get a good test score. I realize that some schools are offering waivers. I don't know how that's going to affect. I haven't heard how that's affecting or will affect either investment banking or consulting hiring. But something to keep in mind if you decide to go for a test waiver. Okay. Now, some of you are going to ask me, should we go for a test waiver? And that will depend very much on the academics that you can show from your undergraduate years. It's going to depend on your work progression. Test waivers are great for people whom the schools can evaluate without a test. But if there's something in your background or qualifications that's going to cause them to question your academic ability, your ability to succeed in their program, they're going to want to see the test, or the test could actually help you get accepted if you get the high score. Okay. Let's move on to March. Keep it up. Again, I would finish the test prep in March, and by the end of the month, try and take the exam, assuming you're ready. And then you should again assess. Did you get a score that you're satisfied with? You're done. Check off the test. If you're dissatisfied, should you retake? That's something to consider. It's not one of the funner things in life to consider, but it's something that many people have to do. And if you're going to retake, then again, you have to think about, why didn't you reach your target? Was there something about your test prep that was changeable? Or was there some external factor that you feel hampered your ability to do well on the exam? In other words, your practice scores were all higher. You went into the exam confident, but there was a jackhammer outside the room, or you developed a migraine in the course of the exam, or you got some really, really bad news the night before, something that would have really thrown you off. And if nothing like that, nothing external really affected your performance, and your practice exams were around the level of where you ended up in the real exam, then you have to think about, what can you do to improve your test prep, to change your test prep, and thereby change the result. If you're finished with the test and want to beef up your academics because maybe your undergraduate GPA doesn't really reflect what you're capable of, then start registering for courses. If your goals aren't clear yet, continue the informational interviews and research that you started in February. Another 4 informational interviews in the month of March, maybe 5 if you can squeeze them in. Okay. Now is the time, however, to get really serious about school research. Scour the school's websites of interest. Look at the employment reports. Look where they're placing people. Are they placing people in the kinds of companies and jobs that you're most interested in? Look at the curriculum. Are they presenting the information you want to learn in the way you want to learn it? Are you interested in a case method school, an experiential approach primarily, or a mixture of all of them? And then extracurriculars. Do they have the clubs and the activities and the competitions and the tracks that you need to achieve your goals? Do those 3 factors, the employment reports, the curriculum, and the extracurriculars, do they show that the schools you're looking at support your social, educational, and professional needs? And then follow the schools of greatest interest to you on social media, whatever you enjoy following and using. Follow them so that you keep up with the schools and continue to build on this foundation of knowledge. I'd also suggest that you start some preliminary work on your essays. First of all, take notes about the aspects of any particular program that really appeals to you, as well as what doesn't appeal to you so much. But what does appeal to you is what's going to go in the essays. And take notes if you have ideas for essays or achievements that you'd like the schools to know about. They could be achievements from the fairly recent past, or they could be things that are happening now that you think are going really, really well and are proud of, or perhaps a promotion. Most schools will not have the questions out yet in March, so I don't think it makes sense to start actually working on essays. And you haven't even chosen yet the schools that you have planned to apply to. But I do think that taking notes about your achievements, the challenges overcome, the interpersonal difficulties perhaps, the impact you've had, those are the things that will go into essays, or could go into essays, or could go into interview responses. And taking those notes can help you and save you time later on. Okay, April and May. Keep it up. If you're retaking that test, resume your prep, continue your prep, or resume and continue your prep. And again, consider improving your prep. Maybe you did online self-study, maybe it's time for an online course. If you did an online course, maybe it's time for a tutor. If you're finished with the test but you need to take some classes, register or start spring quarter classes, or perhaps an online course that doesn't have it's not even on the quarter or the semester system, something like mbamath.com or HBS Core online. There's a summer session coming up. Maybe you can, again, register for some online courses. What you're going to want to be considering again, are strengthening your areas of weakness. So if you're a math whiz and the verbal skills are a little bit low, then consider enrolling in Toastmasters, or taking business communications for business, or business writing, or something like that. If your quant skills are low, then you may want to take either the prerequisites for calculus if you didn't have them, or calculus, accounting 1, economics 1, statistics for business is really, really important and increasingly important with a focus on data analytics. And then again, there's goals. So you may want to draft for yourself a succinct goal statement in terms of the function you want to perform and the industry in which you want to do it after you earn your MBA. This is for you. This is not, you might use it in an essay, you may not use it in an essay, but it's for you and it's going to guide you as you go forth. It can evolve, it can change. You're not signing a contract, but for now you have direction. If you're still not clear on what you want to do MBA, post MBA, then continue your research. You may want to consider talking to a career counselor. We have the former head of career services at Cornell Johnson on staff, or you can use a site like Woke, which is a career guidance site developed by an NYU Stern MBA. And I interviewed her for our podcast, Admission Straight Talk, and you can find it at accepted.com/354. Continue your school research. Attend online events with admissions committee members and students. Attend ones for people from your geography, your identity group, and profession, as well as general admissions presentations. And once you have that professional direction, since you should have it by this month, then you can also start attending, and most schools have them, sessions for people interested in a particular course of particular professional direction. Okay? If by April, it's possible to visit campuses, which frankly I doubt, but if it is possible and also geographically feasible, then do it. If possible, go while classes are in session and try to chat with the students. Attend any functions the schools provide for prospective students. Again, I don't think that's going to be possible this year, but if it is, go for it. And if not, use the online options. Okay, what you can do and get done early is your resume. Nail it. But update it for business school. If you have a highly technical background, realize that the XYZ nifty tool, my son recently is a software developer, and he recently showed me something that he did in PowerPoint. His point was to show me a PowerPoint technique because anything on the slide was completely incomprehensible to me. The doohickey that you developed, the nifty process, that the technical part of it is not going to be of interest to business schools. So don't focus on technical achievements. Focus on your leadership and impact. So whatever you developed, if it cut time to market, saved your customers, money, increased their revenue, you want to focus on is the impact, the business impact of what you did. If it improved processes, reduced labor costs, reduced any kind of cost, increased revenue, improved employee satisfaction, whatever it is, that's what you want to focus on in your resume. And you want to quantify your impact as much as possible. Realize that business schools, and your resumes typically can be 1 to 2 pages. Business schools generally prefer a 1-page resume unless you have 10 or more years of experience, but many will allow you to go up to 2 pages. Just don't, keep it short. Quality over quantity. Okay, essays. Continue to jot down notes as you learn more about the schools, as you attend those events. And again, jot down essay ideas. June, we have a shift. Let's get ready for takeoff. Okay, last on the academic front, hopefully you can retake the test in June, get that higher score, and be. Can you hear me? Because I thought I cut out there for a minute. Yeah? Okay. Continue your courses if you need them. The big thing that you're going to do here is choose the schools where you want to apply. Now, you've done a lot of research. At this point, you should have your test score, you have your GPA, you have the averages that the schools typically admit. You've done your research, you know the schools you want to attend, and you can really reasonably assess the schools likely to want you. You're going to want to apply mostly to schools in this dark shaded area with the happy face. That's where you're going to most likely to get accepted. If you have 1 or 2 outside and in the schools likely to want you area, that's okay. That's fine. And if you have 1 or 2 safety schools, I think that can usually be a very prudent course. But the main thing is to apply in here where you have the intersection of those two circles. If the circles don't intersect, you have the diagram of rejection. You don't want that. So try and choose the schools you want to apply to. And now, since the essay questions are coming out and even some applications are opening up, you can start working on the applications. You can start drafting essays. You can fill in the boxes for the schools that have posted their applications and where you plan to apply round one. You should also choose and ask your recommenders. And first of all, your recommenders should meet the school's criteria for recommenders, and some of them vary. The recommenders should know your work personally, whether it's in a professional setting, and most of the time it will be in a professional setting or a community service setting. Most business schools are not really interested in academic recommendations unless you're applying to a deferred admit program. And the last thing that a recommender should be willing to do about a recommender is that the recommender should be willing and able to write a strong, positive letter of recommendation for you. And you should really ask them that, okay? Are you willing to write a strong letter of recommendation for me? And if they hem and they haw about either their willingness to do so or their ability because of time, ask somebody else. Okay. Now, again, you should really start drafting essays here. And you should make sure that your essays, number one, answer the questions posed. You have no idea how many essays we review that fail to answer the question. Number two, the essays should provide a window into you, the human being and future member of their community and leader in the business world, your motivations, your dreams, again, in the context of the question, but it should be really you. They should add value to the other elements of the application and to each other. In other words, they should complement. Essays can go deeper into events than a resume. They can reflect more of your thoughts than a resume or than a short answer question or a box. But they should definitely be adding value, and they should complement the other elements. And finally, they are a demonstration of your communications ability, specifically your writing ability, but they will go further. And I would strongly encourage you also to develop a schedule so that you finish your applications by their due date. Now, if you are applying to 4 programs and it's June, you should easily be able to get the applications in round 1, okay? If you can't, let's say you're applying, you decide you want to apply to some schools that are stretch schools and you can apply to your competitive schools, and I believe I actually gave a webinar last year, a little later in the year, on what are competitive, stretch, and safety schools. I don't know, Abhijit, maybe you can, if you're there, you can pose a link to that. But if let's say you're applying to more like 8 schools, then you may want to stretch the schools between round 1 and round 2. If you apply round 1 and you're accepted to those schools and you're happy with the schools that you're accepted to, you don't have to apply round 2 and you can save that money. Or you can say, there's different theories on that, but you don't hesitate. Don't give yourself a schedule that you can't do well on, because submitting hasty applications is not a good way to get accepted. Okay, hastily done, sloppy applications will not get you accepted. So do consider, especially if you're applying to more than 4 schools, applying to some programs round 1 and some round 2, and maybe even some round 3. When you're preparing the applications and writing the essays, focus on one school at a time. Don't try and do all your leadership essays and all your achievement essays. That doesn't work. Go school by school, because the applications differ, the requirements are differ, and you want to make sure that your applications are both answering the questions and presenting what you want the schools to know. Remember those notes you took earlier about things you're proud of? That's what you want the school to know about. And then allow time for writing, rewriting, revising, and proofing. The best writing takes time. And if you write and have the time to put it away and come back to it a few days later, it's going to be so much better. Okay, getting back to recommendations. Give recommenders any necessary information. You may want to, and I would keep it to 1-2 pages max. Try and keep it to 1. You may want to highlight an achievement or 2 for them just to refresh their memory. Provide a resume, that can be the second page. And then a brief statement of what the school values if your recommender does not write a lot of letters of recommendation for MBA programs. All right, August, September, you're almost there. You're crossing the finish line because round one deadlines are mostly in September. Finish your essays, your videos if you need to, your short answer questions, and obviously proof any written work. Remind your recommenders weekly of their due date until their recommendations are submitted. I personally would give them a due date a little bit before the actual due date, and then send them a thank you letter, thank you note. Let them know when you know the results of your application, let them know the outcome and thank them again. Continue to attend relevant online school events and to continue to attend classes if you need to again boost that academic part of your profile. Continue to attend as needed. Again, you can continue signing up for more fall quarter, and that could be relevant again depending upon the timing of all that you've done when you started them, what your undergraduate record was, in the event that you're waitlisted. Okay, because then you can even show more academic improvement and more commitment to improve yourself. All right, so submit the day before your polished applications the day before they're due. That's going to come sometime in September. Pat yourself on the back. You've done a lot of hard work. Again, don't stop your courses, your volunteer work, your leadership expansion, etc., because you could need those activities for interviews and if waitlisted. Some of you may review this webinar or kind of be spinning at the end of this webinar, and you may decide that you can't fully prepare by round one deadlines. That's okay. You can apply better, and you're much better off applying when you're really competitive than when you're not. So if you can't get it in by round one, that's fine. Again, whether it's round two, some of you may consider round three, or you wait till next year. That's also an option. If you'd like to discuss that with an accepted consultant, that's definitely something that we do constantly with applicants. For those of you thinking, I don't have to do everything that Linda's talked about today, I don't really think I need to start now, realize that your competition are the applicants who start early, approach the process purposefully and methodically and thoroughly, spend months in their spare time improving their qualifications, researching schools, working on essays, and the presentation of their application. They are your competition. And the competition, especially for the top programs, is intense. So my recommendation to you is that after this Q&A, you get started. Now, we're happy to guide you in determining what you should be working on and where you should apply, as well as advising you on the application content and ultimately editing your essays, resume, etc., and prepping you for interviews. You can start with an hourly advising session with a highly experienced MBA admissions consultant, or purchase comprehensive application packages. We have a broad menu, an extensive menu of service options. And I also have for you a couple of free resources. Some of them I mentioned earlier, the visual MBA application timeline, accepted.com/MBA timeline. That is, you can kind of see it in the background. That's something you can stick on your bulletin board. There's also the written How to Get Accepted to B School in 2021. It doesn't include everything I've said here, but it is much of what I said here. And that's at accept.com/MBA21. And then I also mentioned the Are You MBA Ready quiz. And that will give you an assessment of how you're doing, a percentage grade, if you will. And also it will give you suggestions for improvement, okay, and for areas where you're weak. And at this point, I'm happy to take your questions. Okay. Let's see. How should a prospective MBA applicant handle his or her presence on social media? Do schools track your behavior on social media extensively? I think you should clean up your social media if you have something that doesn't present you well. Schools don't track social media, but they can check social media, as can prospective employers. And if there's something that you would not want a prospective employer to see, I suggest that you get rid of it. So it's a good question. Thank you for that. Okay, let's see. There are a bunch of questions coming through. Can you talk about starting to prepare for a round 3 decision this year? Unfortunately, something is to, you know what? Let me just move this a little bit because I'm having trouble seeing. Okay, can you talk about just starting to prepare for round 3 decision this year, specifically in a fully employed part-time capacity? I'll get to Mahika's question in just a second. This is from CW. Round 3 for part-time is fine. I'm not very optimistic about round 3 for full-time applicants this year, just because it's been there's been such an application surge so far this year, especially for round 1. We actually are having a webinar, I think next week, on round 3 versus next year, but it is for full-time applicants. For part-time or MBA applicants, round 3 I think is quite reasonable because the application cycle is a little bit later. So go for it. That's really all I can. I don't know if I specifically answered your question, but otherwise, just do everything you can to turn in as good an application as you possibly can. Okay, so Mahika asks, is an MIM better than an MBA in terms of landing a job? Most MBA schools require work experience, which I don't have. Okay, so Mahika, there's 2 answers to that. For somebody without work experience, you have several of the MBA programs offer what they call deferred admissions programs. Among them are Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, Columbia, Haas. I think that might just be for UC students, though. MIT Sloan, Chicago, Kellogg. And there are, I think Darden does also. These are programs that you can apply to, and their third round applications are perfectly, no pun intended, acceptable. They're normal. That's when they expect them. And so you can apply to those. You then work for usually 2 to 5 years, and then you are guaranteed admission at the school that you applied to. So that's one option. The other option is the MIM, the Masters in Management. Masters in Management are for people either very early in their career or without any full-time work experience. And they are a great way to start your career in business. Whether you will later need an MBA kind of remains to be determined if you have an MIM. Some go for the MBA later, some don't. Some then do an abbreviated MBA because they have the MIM. So the MIM. So I hope I answered that question. All right. So is it a good idea to start cold calling current students, alumni of your schools so early before even submitting your application? I'm not clear if this is in response to my suggestions to do informational interviews, but I wouldn't cold call them. I would email them very respectfully or contact them on LinkedIn, or perhaps many schools have student ambassadors who have specifically volunteered to answer questions from prospective applicants. So again, don't cold call them, but do contact them, reach out to them, and ask them if they would be willing to speak with you. Okay, I hope that clarified that question. Okay, well, this is another good question. Follow-up question, what are some general etiquettes or things you should strictly avoid while talking to current students, alumni, admissions officials? Okay, I think one of the things I know admissions officials hate is if you ask them, your chances of acceptance. You can ask me that. You can ask admissions consultants that. You can ask the staff that accepted that. We'll give you an assessment. And again, you have the tool, the Are You Ready MBA tool, where you can get like a percentage grade. And it's not really a chance of your reflection of your chances of acceptance in percentage terms, but it's more an indication of how well you're doing. So you can do that there. You can ask us. You can ask on the forums, obviously, the GMAT Club forums, but don't ask admissions people. And in terms of current students, they probably wouldn't mind, but I'm not sure how much they know. And in terms of alumni, the same thing. So I would avoid doing that. What you can ask, And obviously, be respectful, be courteous. If you're rude to anybody at a school, whether it's a student, alumni, an admissions official, a janitor, a receptionist, you are hurting yourself. You are just hurting yourself. So remember, courtesy counts. It's that simple. I think I'm going to go to the next question. Is it okay to give pointers to a recommender for a recommendation, or should it be completely left to them? I think that would depend a little bit on whom you're asking for the recommendation. If you're asking somebody who's written, hundreds of recommendations, then no, don't give them any pointers. If you're asking somebody who rarely writes letters of recommendation for business school, then I think something very succinct, giving them pointers, is warranted. We actually have on Accepted 10 tips for recommenders. Let me see if I can get that up, and I can post it. Yeah, I got it. You can send them to this. And actually, I had an interesting experience. Last week, my daughter texted me. Her sister-in-law works in finance and was asked to write a letter of recommendation for an MBA program. And actually, I can post in the comments, I think. I can't. Oh, well. You can Google accepted.com 10 tips for recommenders, because I can't figure out how to, something is hiding where I would post this. Nope, whatever. Again, Google 10 tips for recommenders for Accepted, and you'll be fine. My daughter told me that her sister-in-law was asked to write a recommendation, and she Googled, tips for recommenders, and our thing came up, and it was very, very helpful. So that's a little bit of a unbiased endorsement, if you will. Okay, let's go on. So yes, it's okay if they are not used to writing recommendations. Does European MBA require to start application process early? Does applying early increase chances of getting selected? Amit, that actually was the first thing I said today, that applying. Oh, you mean actually applying. I'm talking about starting early. My general recommendation, especially for the American programs, I don't think it's as important for the European programs. So the distinction that you're raising is a good one. But for the US programs, my recommendation is apply in the earliest round possible, provided that you don't compromise the quality of your application. That provided is in caps, all caps, okay? Apply in the first round possible, provided that you don't compromise the quality of your application. Okay? That should be your guideline. You're much better off submitting a high quality, polished application round 2 than a sloppy job round 1. There's no competitive advantage. There's no early round advantage if your application isn't top notch. Okay. Thanks for the question. It was a good one. Okay. Here's the one from S. I just got my GMAT score. Is it too late to apply right now? Well, you could apply round 3 now. And again, I'd refer you to our round 3 versus next year webinar. And I'm sure that if you Google Accepted round 3 versus next year webinar, it might even be on the GMAT Club calendar. Then you'll find it. I think for most schools, it'd be difficult to put in a round 2 deadline. You might find some schools with later January deadlines and still be able to get that in. But it kind of depends how much time you have available, what schools you're most interested in, etc. For round 3, I don't know if you're a US-based applicant or an international applicant. If you're international, it's generally harder to get visas in time if you're accepted round 3. So anyway, that's my answer to that one. And then I think Abhijit had just posted a question and I disappeared. Here we are. From Sri, should a working professional with around 8 years of experience even try for a 2-year program, or should he stick to an executive 1-year MBA 1-year program? 8 years is at the upper end of experience. But if you really want the immersive 2-year program and you have good reasons for it and a realistic post-MBA goal for somebody at your level, then you can try for that. We do have also a resource for older applicants. Again, Google accepted.com, older MBA applicants, and it'll give you a whole bunch of advice on how to apply effectively as an older MBA. We also have worked with many older MBAs, and they've been accepted and done well. Okay. Okay, from Siddharth, will doing an online MS course help improve profile covering for low GPA for MBA or just course on Coursera, etc.? Good to go. That depends a little bit on how low your GPA was. Was there any upward trend to it, etc.? In general, when you're trying to mitigate the impact of a low GPA, I'm not a big fan of Coursera because it's not graded. And most in general isn't graded. It just doesn't have quite the same credibility and weight as an accredited program with courses and tests and papers or projects. If it's an MS, probably. So I would go for an accredited program. The only exceptions to that, in my mind, would be HBS Core Online and or MBAmath.com. And if if your background is highly quantitative, I think I'd probably go more with the HBS Core Online or the MS program that you mentioned. Another great question. You folks are asking really good questions. And Abhijit, you're doing a great job of choosing them. How can we build on leadership skills if that is not a possibility currently in our job role? That's a good question. If it's not possible in your job role, then I would suggest that you build them in community service roles. Get involved somewhere in something that's important to you and assume responsibility for something. It could be a fundraiser. It could be some initiative that the organization is undertaking. Obviously, it has to be done safely, given COVID restrictions. But it could be even organizing food distribution to shut-ins who can't go to the marketplace or shouldn't be going to the marketplace. There's lots of opportunities. The more problems there are, the more opportunities there are for problem solvers. And get some people to work with you on it, initiative that you have, and suddenly you are in a leadership role and having impact. And that's what the schools want to see. I hope that helped. Chelsea, is it okay to ask an international employee who doesn't speak English well but is the CEO of a multinational company to write a recommendation letter for me and have it translated into English? Yes. That's the exact thing that you should do. You should have your recommender write it in his or her native language and then have it professionally translated and sent to the school. Can you put some light on Canadian MBA schools like Rotman? How's Canada as a demographic for post-MBA? I'm of all the Canadian schools, I'm probably most familiar with Rotman. It is a very well-regarded program, very innovative program. I visited it once. I'm really impressed with it. We've also interviewed the head of admissions from Rotman. I interviewed him 1 or 2 years ago. I had a great interview, and the whole concept of spike factor, which is really important to them. And I might add most schools, but I just don't name it so clearly. So I think that as so often is the case, it matters what do you want to do after your MBA. If you want to settle in Canada, Canadian MBA programs are fantastic. If you want to settle somewhere else, well, then you have to see whether it places people in the regions that you, or if it has, how should I say? Yeah, if it places people where you want to settle or has connections there, or if you don't need those connections, then it can be a great way to get a very good business degree. Again, does it place people in the companies that you want to work for, even if you don't want to settle in Canada? If the companies you want to work for are international companies with offices where you do want to work, then Canada is, again, a great option. They do allow, they're pretty generous, I believe, with visas post, to people who've studied there for at least a short time. So you could get a job with a company that you're most interested, as long as it has offices in Canada, and hopefully later transfer to where you want to go. So it is a really good option if it fits what you want to do. Okay. Pradeep asks, is an undergraduate score necessary if the applicant already has a master's degree before applying for MBA? Well, I assume if you have a master's, you also have some kind of undergraduate record. Most schools do require an undergraduate degree, though they're obviously okay with a combination of undergraduate and graduate. And they will look at your undergraduate scores because that's something that all MBA applicants, or virtually all MBA applicants, have. Now, if you didn't do well as an undergrad and you had really good scores in your grad studies, then that is a mitigating factor, and it basically implies that either you were immature as an undergraduate and matured and did well, but clearly you have the ability and you know how to study, or perhaps there was something going on in your personal life when you were in undergraduate school, illness, family issues, whatever, and they were resolved, and in graduate studies you performed well because you were no longer dealing with those things or had learned how to deal with those things. So it's definitely going to help you, but schools will look at your undergraduate record. Okay. Follow-up question. Any thoughts on applicants for second MBA? Well, first of all, you have to make sure, is your degree considered an MBA? I know there's what is it in India, the PG, I'm forgetting what the acronym is, but it's a postgraduate degree in management, I think is what it is. And some schools count that as an MBA, and then they are not interested and they will not evaluate you even. I think mostly it's the public universities that are more inclined to take that position. Like I think UC Berkeley is in that, Haas is in that camp. But you have to check the schools individually to see if they will consider somebody who has an MBA previously, and if they consider your degree an MBA, because some do not consider the postgraduate diploma an MBA. Now, if you do have an MBA and you want to apply to programs for a second MBA, and you've made sure that they will evaluate your application, you have to make clear to them why you need this. What do you want to do that their school will enable you to do, their MBA program will enable you to do that you cannot do now? And how? That's what you have to answer. That's the question you have to answer. Okay, let's go. Next question. Is working in a multinational, this is from Siddharth, is working in a multinational corporation handling international clients on a day-to-day work basis equate to international exposure for personal international exposure for wage and application? It's definitely considered international exposure, sure, but it's not. Again, it's not like you're getting brownie points for different things. It's certainly international exposure. Is it as impressive international exposure as somebody who lived in different places? No, but it is international exposure, and you're going to, depending upon the kind of work that you do and the different things in your application, you're going to want to say, at least in your resume, that you're handling international clients on a day-to-day basis, or work on a multinational team of 20 or lead team of 20, whatever it is, and say it's a multinational team, so that comes through. How much emphasis you put on it in your application and where and how, that will depend both on the schools you're applying to. A school like INSEAD emphasizes this enormously. Other schools, it's a nice to have, but not critical. And also the other achievements and things that you want to highlight in your application. Okay, thank you, Siddharth, for an excellent question. Okay, Tatenda asks, any thoughts on applying during round 3 for an international student? Is it true round 3 slots are limited? Again, I'd invite you to attend our round 3 versus next year webinar, which is, I think, next week. Actually, I know it's next week. You can Google it, accepted round 3 versus next year webinar. We're going to go into that a lot. To answer your question briefly, though, it also depends where you are in the world. It's harder for international students to get the visa in time for the start of class. So I think that's an issue. It is true that round 3 slots tend to be more limited. Last year was definitely different. I think my sense is that with the surge in applications, this year is going to be more typical. In round 3, applicants are going to look for, schools are going to look for applicants who truly stand out and who are going to round out their class. So add distinctive elements to the profile. That's going to be key. I'm going to go into this much more in that webinar, though, and you're invited. Okay. Let's see. Oh, thank you for posting that, Abhijit. I appreciate that. Okay. If there's a career break, will that be a negative factor in the MBA application? It's not a positive, but it also depends in terms of its impact on when did it happen. If you're currently unemployed, well, under current circumstances, I think that is understandable, but it also depends on how long were you unemployed and when were you unemployed. If you were unemployed, let's say 5 years ago for 6 months or even a year, for whatever reason, I don't think and you've been steadily employed since then with increasing responsibility and nice stability, then I don't think it's going to be a problem at all. If you were unemployed for a year prior to COVID and when the economy was booming and your unemployment has continued now, which might be understandable, that's going to be much more of an issue. It's going to be a significant issue, actually. Is my application looked down upon if I want to experiment something that's not related to my goal by quitting my job for a few months? It depends on what that something is. And what you might want to do is quit your job after you're accepted, after you're admitted. If you apply round 1 next year and you know by December that you're in, that can easily give you 6 months to experiment with whatever you want to experiment. Now, if your experimentation is perhaps launching a startup, that could be actually very much admired, especially if it takes off and does well. But even if it doesn't, the fact that you tried it, that you learned from it, your reflections on the experience, it's not the same as being unemployed. So it really depends what you want to do. So Sri asks, is the process strategy of application to top MBA and business schools different from the ones in Europe and United States? In India, I believe there's another exam that is frequently taken. I think the general qualities that Indian business schools, I've interviewed the director of admissions, this was a few years ago, from the Indian School of Business, and they certainly were looking for the same things that the American schools were looking for: leadership, impact, etc. We do have somebody on staff who has a lot of experience with the top Indian business schools, but it's not me, so I'm not sure I can say much more than that. Okay. Any final thoughts? Well, my final thought is the one I'm going to start with. First of all, thank you very much for coming. You're smart to be here so that you can start this process early or consider round 3. And I congratulate you for starting early. And I'm hoping that when you leave this webinar, you're going to just keep on moving forward with your application. You're going to do the assessment in January. You're going to get going. You're going to launch your application effort in February and move steadily forward so that you apply purposefully, thoughtfully, and successfully. Good luck with your application. Thank you so much for coming and for joining me.